Welcome to 247 Real Talk. This is your host, Julian Perry. It's a pleasure to be here with you once again for another week. I hope you had a great week last week since we last spoke. You'll notice as I continue, as I promised, to make improvements to the studio so that we can have this real personal relationship and conversation between me through a camera lens and you. That, I managed to get rid of the big headphones. I managed to get rid of the microphone that usually covers or stands between us. For those using YouTube who have subscribed and who share and who have found it really more engaging to watch me on YouTube, then you would see the visual and understand. As I do with all weeks, I think about things that come to mind, and then I go ahead and record an episode based on what I want to have real talk about that week. This Wednesday, September 27th, as I look at the camera, at the clock behind my camera, 9:59 p.m. And this week, even though it's late, and I do get up at 4 a.m., so, this is late for me to start recording, but I want to talk a little bit about childcare, about the responsibilities of childcare, the risks surrounding childcare, and a few things about, what we can do to make sure that our children are safe and who should be responsible for those things. So sit back, relax, and I'll be right back with you. So welcome back to 247 Real Talk Podcast. Before I go any further, I'd ask those of you who are listening to me, both on audio and video, to let me, send me some feedback if you see any issues with the sound. Entirely new system, as you can probably tell from YouTube. I'm using in-ear monitors and allows me to monitor everything that's going on around me as I broadcast it and still have an intimate conversation with you. So there's a few things that triggered my conversation for this episode. And if you notice too, I've been trying to keep the episodes a little shorter so that you get the information and don't have such a long period of time to do so. Two things happened, I think it's within the last week in New York City. First, there was a daycare where a 1-year-old child died from an overdose of fentanyl. And 2 other children got really sick and were rushed to the hospital. I don't know all the details because the case is still unfolding, but it turns out that this child was apparently laying on a mat that was contaminated with fentanyl. And it turns out that the people who were running the daycare were also running a drug operation. I believe it was either yesterday or today, probably today, I heard about another story in Harlem somewhere, I think in Harlem, New York, where authorities raided a daycare, licensed daycare. These are all licensed daycares. And they arrested the daycare owner's son, took away a 3D printer. They found 3D printed rifles, semi-automatic rifles, and other rifles that he had printed. So apparently he was selling ghost guns out of the same place where the daycare was. And I'm trying to put these pieces together in my head because I'm trying to figure out. I remember when my kids were that small, where I paid a lot of money to have them go to a daycare that had a lot of security and cameras everywhere and was clean, and still had to trust that when the daycare told me that they vetted the teachers and the people responsible for my young children for an entire day, every day, 5 days a week, that they were vetted and that way they would treat my children right. I still had to take certain things at face value and hope that what the facility said they were doing is what they were doing and there were no illegal practices going on. I remember it being such a time of anxiety for me for a while until I became comfortable with the daycare. And I would say hesitantly comfortable, cautiously comfortable. As luck would have it, as blessings would have it, my children went through those stages, both of them, and to the same daycare And it was, I remember at the time, it was also very financially challenging because they're really expensive. You know, you go to daycares and you get the daycare in a certain environment, certain features of the daycare, like the security and the extra staff and all those things. You pay a premium for that. And my kids are only, I don't know, 16 months apart or something like that. So, or 18 months apart. So you understand that I was paying for both kids at one time. But what do you do when you have a licensed daycare? And you remember, I think many parents, now not most parents, and we'll get to the other issue here, but let's talk about the licensed daycares first, because these are two daycare centers that both were carrying on illegal operations with our children. Let's call it community, our children there. What do you do when you follow all the rules? When you make sure the daycare is licensed? When you hold, the health department, all these people accountable for checking to make sure that, they pass inspections and all that? What do you do when that is the most you can do, and then your child dies from an overdose of fentanyl? There was a time when I felt that, and I still feel in a way that society, the way society is designed, especially here in the United States, it's not encouraging to have children. Many employers don't make it easy, knowing that people at a certain age will have a family at some point, or a subset of those people. They don't make it easy. They make mothers come back to work pretty quickly, some of them. They know they're not paying you great salaries. They understand the cost of safe child care, and they don't care. Many employers' position seems to be, well, you're the one who decided to have a child. If you don't want to deal with the risks or the challenges that come with it, then don't have a child. But tell me how wrong that is. Think about it for a second. We are human beings first. We are here on this planet as a community. Generations continue because of population. And so to make it difficult for parents to have children because they've got to basically put themselves through a struggle, or wait till they're in such a financial situation or position that they can so-called afford it, either the clock will run out, or we have to make the choice to go into a difficult situation because there's all the other things, right? There's the fact that we still deal with, especially for minority families. Now, I'm dealing with families in general, but I say it's for minority families because this is one of the challenges. The disparity in income. In some cases where you have a single mother, here you go again, the disparity in income due to gender. And so people have to deal with the fact that they're not getting paid what the entire economic environment requires for a decent life. They're working crazy hours, sometimes 2 jobs. They could be brilliant as anything else, but depending on their gender and their ethnicity, they're not getting promoted. They're dealing with what rich people do to societies with the stock market, the things that create inflation, as their greed allows them to manipulate this financial system that we have. And everybody else suffers by the hands of a few, the top 1% wealthy. And so making a decision to have a family and have young kids has to be one that's, or should be one that's exactly that, family based. Everything else around you, as long as you're going to work, you're working hard, you're doing everything for advancement. Everything else in the right society, in the perfect society, should be in place, but it's not. And here we have a situation now where, also there are a few people who are lucky to have grandparents or something that are there to take care of their children. But then there are those that don't. Now I'm sort of going to segue for a second. I'm going to bring something up on the screen for those of you on YouTube, and I'll read it out for those of you on the audio podcast, only because when I said grandparents, we automatically make an assumption too that you have a parent or a family member take care of your kids, that they're safe. And while I know that may be really pushing us to an extreme because we want to say, well, how can we, make sure that that relative will treat our kids kindly? How can we even make sure that the parents will? And there's a lot more. This conversation is so huge because there's things like mental health. There are things that when a parent has a child, if they're struggling with mental health issues, all the other support mechanisms have to be around to make sure that there is child care. Not just a 9 to 5, making sure you can go to work, but caring for the child's well-being. That to me is not only the parent's responsibility, but it's society's responsibility, simply because we live in a world, we are people first. Businesses, material things, wealth, all those things are secondary. We were born as human beings, born to communities where we are supposed to take care of each other. And I bring that up, like I said, and let me see if I can pull this up for you, for those on YouTube, and I'm going to read it for you online. Here's an article, and I'll try to enlarge it a bit. It says, let me see if I can get that out the way. A Chicago mother, this happened in 2021. A Chicago mother has been charged after she allegedly shot dead her 12-year-old son over a missing SD memory card. I won't call her name, but I guess it's public knowledge. Fallon Harris, 37, is accused of shooting her son, Kadeen Ingram, in the head multiple times inside their South Chicago home on Saturday morning. Prosecutors alleged in court that security cameras inside the home captured Harris pointing a gun at her son as she demanded he hand over the memory card. When the boy said he didn't have the card, Harris allegedly fired a shot at her son's head. The boy was conscious and crying after the first shot, according to prosecutors. Harris allegedly took a phone call while her son was lying on the kitchen floor, and then came back to demand the memory card again. She then shot her son in the head a second time, prosecutors allege. Police were alerted by 2 family members whom Harris had called immediately after the shooting to allegedly admit what she had done. So we have a mother who shot and killed her child, shot that child twice in the head over a memory card. It's got to be a mental health issue embedded in there. That's not normal. So here we have a scenario with a child, the first scenario, who dies, 1-year-old, because he's poisoned by fentanyl from a drug operation. Then we have the children who were removed from the care of the other child care because they're printing guns. And then we have a child who's in the presence of their parent, their mother. Mother's love, right? And the mother shoots their child twice in the head over a memory card. You tell me what's wrong with society and what's wrong with how we're taking care of our children. What's wrong with child care? I know when I came on here and I talked about the 2 child care centers, licensed child care centers, you might have thought that that's where my conversation is going. That's what I'm focusing on. But notice what I said, child care. We have an obligation to leave this place better than we met it. We have an obligation to take care of the next generation. And we have to collaboratively and collectively do so, managing all of the risks. Employers are responsible. Parents are responsible. Teachers are responsible. Medical personnel are responsible. Families are responsible. Governments are responsible. Businesses are responsible. Think about this. What if you had a requirement that every business that employed X amount of employees, let's start on a big scale because we can't go too granular with this, but let's say employed over a certain amount of employees was mandated to have a child care on premises. A child care where they would hire vetted caretakers who would be monitored, who a parent could take a break during the day whenever they had their breaks and go peep at their child, so to speak. And then when they left work, they could pick up their child and take their child home. The parent would pay a subsidized fee, partially funded by the government, maybe a partially, or the government would provide certain tax breaks or whatever to the company, and the company would do this low rate thing where the pre-tax, maybe the parent could pay X amount out of their salary, which would be a lot less than paying a child care. Now think about that wonderful world. I know people may say you're reaching, that's never going to happen. But there's many things we talked about that are never going to happen. My point is, think about the time. I mean, I remember you get up in the morning, you drop your kids to daycare. The daycare doesn't open before, let's say, 8 a.m. So then you leave after dropping them and you catch public transportation. You get to work now maybe just before 10. The daycare closes at 6, the latest. But since you got in at 10, you can't leave before 6. You pay someone else to pick up your kids, or if there's a situation with a daycare or the bus, to have the bus drop the kids off at as a caretaker, whom you now pay again on top of the daycare. You get off of work, you travel to that caretaker who might not be near your home. You pick up that child who's had this extremely long day, and now you take them, travel again, public transportation sometimes if you can't do it. Because even if you have a car, depending on where you work, driving is not going to work, right? Public transportation is the fastest way. I remember friends of mine would drive out of their way to drop their kids to daycare and then drive at a certain strategic point and drive around sometimes for half an hour, 45 minutes to find parking on the street to take the railroad into work. So when they come home, they could get off at that stop, get their car, go for their kids, pick up their kids, then drive all the way across town to take their kids back home. Now it's 8:30 at night and the young kids are now getting home. Now you prepare dinner. Now you spend some time with your kids, find out how their day was and looking at, just paying attention to them. If they're very young, my wife used to basically, when she would bathe them, she would look at their entire skins and bodies because we know what happens in daycare. So she would check them out physically to make sure they're okay. Now by the time you finish, you get them fed, you get them to bed. Sometimes they don't go to bed right away. Now it's time to take care of yourself. If you're in an intact family, you have a spouse, and both of you are running this schedule, maybe you have 2 children, one picks up one picks up the other. However it works, the point is you're now having dinner at 10:30 at night. You're now getting a moment to speak to each other for a few minutes because you're exhausted. You got to get to bed. You got to wake up the next day and do this all over again. The point I'm making is it takes a village to raise a child. And we have gone such a long time without demanding certain things from our companies, from politicians, demanding certain laws be passed. We're demanding that our governments govern, I've said to you many weeks in succession, by the people, for the people. Our governments take care of the things that we need as people, and they mandate businesses to become part of that caretaking of human lives. The children of today are the adults of tomorrow. This journey of life was written before we got here. We don't get to change the narrative to stay here forever. We will leave this place. However, you embrace that thought, however you deal with that thought, however scared you are of that thought, however realistic you are, that's a fact. Each and every year we celebrate a birthday and we get older. And we watch our children being raised. And we watch our children being raised in a different society. And we watch them struggle because society has changed so much. And we watch them grow, and we're concerned that they're seeing our struggle. And we are so busy trying to survive that we haven't had the chance, or we don't take the time to set an example as a society and as individuals. The story I read to you before earlier, and those of you on YouTube saw online, a mother shot her son to death over a memory card. It's a 2-year-old story, but it happened across my news feed today, and I had to read it. People, families, communities, governments are not doing enough about mental health. And the result is in many cases, our children are suffering. It becomes a child care issue because we are destroying the lives and the minds of tomorrow's society. We cannot be so selfish that we don't think about anyone else but ourselves. We cannot become like our current government in Washington, so greedy and so vile and so vicious and so self-absorbed that they forgot that they were elected by the people for the people. This tit for tat makes no sense. If someone committed a crime, they need to deal with it, but they need to deal with us, the people, too. As I record this episode, there's a looming possibility of a government shutdown. I don't think it will happen. I'm hoping it doesn't happen, because when that happens, many people in certain federal levels, the Capitol Police, the same police and all the law enforcement and all the civilian staff too that take care of the federal employees and our government in Washington won't get paid. You ever try telling a babysitter or an established child care that you don't have money to pay them? They'll tell you your child can't come back. So your child can't come back because you're not getting paid, but you're expected still to report to work even though you're not getting paid or your job is in jeopardy. Now you've got no one to watch your child. You don't have a child care at work, so you can't bring them and drop them off here and continue to work even if you're working for nothing. Your financial situation might be so dire that you're living paycheck to paycheck, which in American society these days, I want to think that that's a huge percentage. I will do an episode one day where I'll look up the statistics as what the average is percentage of how many families, how many individuals across the United States out of the working population are living paycheck to paycheck. Many of us do that. Many of us are either 1 or 2 paychecks away from trouble. And not because we haven't planned properly, but we've simply lived life, right? I mean, it's easy to tell someone, okay, don't have children now. Save money until you get X amount of money in the bank. Well, but I'm not going to give you the best job even though you're qualified for it. I'm not going to promote you because of the color of the skin or because of your gender. I'm going to leave you at the same salary even though there's inflation and prices are out the roof. I'm going to make all these demands of you. But you know what? When you save money, and then you can start a family. You put people in an impossible position. We as human beings are so self-absorbed that we fail to recognize the value of each other. This story has a lot of tentacles because it goes a lot further into young lives being lost, etc. But I wanted to come back to our children in childcare and make sure that we start looking at our families, at our communities. We start, if your job, some jobs will be open enough to say, hey, employees, we want to know what you think. What could we improve? Maybe somebody needs to suggest that. Maybe it won't get done at that time, but maybe the conversation will start. Things are expensive. It is hard raising children. I mean, it's just crazy that when you look at what a pamper is made of and recognize that not only are there, and I remember when my kids were in Pampers, it was ridiculously expensive. And the fact is that it's such a capitalist system that I don't know if you ever recognized it, but the older the child got, I'm trying to get this right, because it was like the younger kid that changed Pampers more frequently. Their Pampers were more expensive. So that's why they grabbed the money for you, because you kept going back to the store for these big boxes. I go to Costco, whatever, and you look at the prices like, whoa, this doesn't make sense, because you think the older child, is more material or whatever. But the older child is less money, but now you also get less in the box. So they work out the formula. The younger child is way more money, and they're changing frequently, so you're buying these things. You could literally, you need a budget just for Pampers. You tell me that in a country where I think I forgot the number, but we well over several $1 trillion in aid to Ukraine. A country, the same country, yes, my friend who watches my show all the time, the same country that turned its back on its students with a basic student loan forgiveness. You tell me this same country that has given, what is it? A sort of amnesty to Venezuelan migrants. They come in, they get immediately processed for work permits and all the other benefits. We give so much to foreigners, and we can't do enough to care about our own. It might be cliche to say our children are our future, but it's also the truth. So let's do something in this whole movement and the different things I talk about each week. I'm looking to holding myself responsible, looking to you out there who listen to me, to continue to reach out to me, and let's start another brainstorming campaign of what we can come up with and how we can do it to start scraping away at the Teflon of these greedy empires, and make sure that we start paying attention to taking care of our children in the daycares, in having businesses be part of the solution, having mental health be a focus to make sure that parents are in a situation where they are mentally fit to take care of their children. And the solution is not just to snatch their children away, the solution is to help their parents too and get to the bottom of this mental health crisis that's sweeping this nation. I thank you so much for this opportunity to be with you once again. It's always a privilege and a pleasure to talk with you and to share my thoughts with you. I thank you again so much. I hope that you continue to subscribe, that you share the podcast, please. I wish you a great weekend and a week ahead. And please, as I always tell you, please do take care of yourselves and each other.